In tonight's news edition, the Prime Minister says Jordan cannot alone bear the burden of hosting a large number of Syrian refugees amid a decline in funding. In a final bid to woo right-wing voters on the eve of Israel's elections, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vows that no Palestinian state will emerge on his watch. And Syrian President Bashar al-Assad dismisses remarks by the US Secretary of State that he should be included in negotiations on a political transition. Good evening and very warm welcome to the news. Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour called on the international community to support the Jordan response plan to Syrian refugees as the levels of funding last year fell short of meeting their needs. Mansour, who chaired a meeting on the national response plan, warned that if the funding shortage continues, the consequences will be tremendous. More in this report.
Resource poor Jordan is the world's third largest host of refugees. Syria's civil war, now in its fifth year, has taken a heavy toll on the country's neighbors, where millions of displaced Syrians had sought refuge. Jordan is host to 1 million Syrians. About half of them had fled to the kingdom before the conflict began in 2011. Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour told delegates to a meeting on the national response plan to the refugees crisis that Jordan cannot handle the massive burden of accommodating such a large number of refugees without international support. He said the refugee influx had placed heavy pressure on the kingdom's public sector and infrastructure.
Jordan is wholly committed to a peaceful resolution of the crisis in Syria. The security situation must be addressed comprehensively. Jordan supports a political solution based on reforms that give all communities a role in rebuilding their country. The situation we are facing is unprecedented. Today, Jordan is the world's third largest host of refugees. This crisis has had a profound impact across the entire country and is placing an overwhelming burden on Jordan's people, infrastructure, government services, and limited resources.
The meeting tackled the latest developments of the 2015 Jordan response plan to the Syrian crisis and means of securing additional assistance to priority projects included in the strategy.
We count on the international community to support the JRP as the levels of funding last year fell short of meeting the needs, as was expressed by His Excellency the Minister of Flying a while ago. If this trend continues, the consequences will be tremendous, not only for refugees, but also for the Jordanians, jeopardizing all that we have worked hard to achieve so far as a nation.
The meeting brought together Arab and other foreign ambassadors, as well as representatives of the United Nations agencies. Edward Callenew, and resident coordinator, highlighted the importance of the meeting.
The platform is an effort to try to bring together both the humanitarian and the resilience assistance to ensure that the development gains of Jordan are not lost. The United Nations has been working closely with the Ministry of Planning to try to bridge the divide between humanitarian and development assistance through a resilience-based approach. This platform today demonstrates that the international community is coming together to look at the needs of Jordan as they host the Syrian refugees. And these needs go beyond just addressing the needs of refugees, but also looking at host communities that are hosting refugees in Jordan. We are dealing with a unique situation in this country where we have a very high percentage of the Syrian refugees are living in host communities and relying on government basic services like health, water, sanitation that are also overstretched.
Interior Minister Hussein Al-Majali told the gathering the Syrian crisis had affected almost every sector, with infrastructure hardest hit. Majali stressed close coordination among all stakeholders when implementing projects to ease the burden of the refugee crisis on the kingdom. Planning and International Cooperation Minister Imad Al-Fakhouri said the participation of the Prime Minister and ministers in the meeting clearly emphasizes the seriousness of the country to address the refugee crisis head-on and ease the heavy cost of the influx. Hiba Al-Atoum for the news at 10.
On the eve of Election Day, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made clear his hardline policy. The right-wing Likud leader is trailing his centre-left opponent Isaac Herzog in opinion polls. In a final bid to shore up right-wing support, Netanyahu vowed he would not permit a Palestinian state to be created under his watch if he is re-elected. Here's more.
It's a closely fought contest, with polls showing no clear lead. 5.9 million eligible voters will cast their votes at 10,000 polling stations across Israel that will open tomorrow. It's the Israelis' vote in the second snap election in 2 years, and polls indicate that right-wing Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party is facing a serious challenge from the centre-left Zionist Union. Netanyahu used a strategic Jewish settlement he helped found as the backdrop for an election eve bid to win back right-wing votes. His main challenger, Isaac Herzog, leader of the Zionist Union, said on Facebook that Israel will be stuck with Bibi, as he is known, unless voters turned out tomorrow for the centre-left alliance. Final opinion polls predicted the centre-left Zionist Union, led by Herzog and Tzivi Livni, would take between 24 and 26 seats in tomorrow's vote, compared to 22 seats for Netanyahu's Likud. No single party has ever won an outright majority in the legislature, making coalitions the norm.
I don't think that there will be a big surprise in this election. There will be left-wing government, which is something different, but I don't see how it will change my life in a special way.
The Prime Minister said that as long as he remains Israel's leader, a Palestinian state would not be established. His remarks appeared amid rallying right-wing support, as in the past he envisaged the creation of a demilitarized Palestinian state as a part of a permanent peace deal.
An international initiative will be presented to us to return to 1967 borders, to divide Jerusalem. Those are real things. It is going to happen. We need to form a strong, firm national government headed by Likud in order to push those pressures away.
Netanyahu has focused much of his campaign on security issues, paying a continuous visit to Washington 2 weeks ago to warn against a potential nuclear deal with Iran. Netanyahu has raised eyebrows in Israel by alleging that foreign powers want to topple him. Political commentators said he had underestimated voters' concerns about soaring housing and food prices and miscalculated when he called an early election in December. Loy Balkar for the news at 10.
In other news now, Iraq said it had put on hold its offensive to retake the key city of Tikrit as senior officials called for more air raids to dislodge the Daesh terrorists. Meantime, a Kurdish officer said his forces were expected on 2 further chlorine gas attacks by the terrorists. In the western province of Anbar, officials said the Iraqi army had carried out airstrikes against Daesh militants. The Ministry of Defense said the raids hit Daesh targets in Garma town, 30 kilometers northwest of the capital, Baghdad. Video footage released by the ministry showed vehicles on a road and a building being hit by explosions. It said the strikes damaged a number of vehicles, killed a large number of militants and cut their supply routes. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad dismissed remarks by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry that he should be included in talks to enable a political transition in the country. Speaking on state television, the Syrian president said that only the Syrian people have the final say on any political transition in Syria. Kerry said earlier in an interview that Washington would have to negotiate with the Syrian president. He did not repeal or repeat the standard U.S. line that the Syrian leader had lost legitimacy and had to go. France's Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius said Kerry assured him Washington had not changed its stand on Syria. Fabius told reporters at an EU foreign ministers meeting in Brussels the French position on the Syrian crisis had not changed either. Meantime, the Syrian Air Force bombed 2 suburbs in the southwest of the capital, Damascus. Government airstrikes hit residential areas in Dariyah, where clouds of dust and smoke could be seen rising over the epicenter of the bombings. Amateur videos showed the collapse of a tower after a heavy missile was said to have targeted the suburb of Jobar. Yesterday, Syrian Air Force jets carried out strikes on Douma city, an insurgent stronghold northeast of Damascus, with 18 people killed and at least 100 wounded. Fighting was also reported in the northeastern province of Hasaka between Kurdish forces and Daesh terrorists. 4 years into the conflict, the military has concentrated its forces in the south, the capital and areas along the country's western coast.
الله أكبر عم هرهي الله أكبر الله أكبر إسقاط برج المعلمين الله أكبر حي جوبر دمشقي.
Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif left the Swiss city of Lausanne for Brussels for talks with European ministers on Iran's nuclear program. Zarif spent 4 hours in bilateral negotiations with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry earlier in the day, with the first meetings also attended by U.S. Secretary of Energy Ernest Moniz and Iran's nuclear chief Ali Akbar Salehi. Kerry has urged Iran to make concessions that would allow a political framework agreement to be reached. Negotiations between the 2 ministers are due to resume later in Lausanne. The parties have set a June 30th deadline to finalize an accord. The Western powers hope to have a political framework agreement by the end of March. Kerry took time out of diplomacy as he went for a bicycle ride round the lakeside Swiss city.
Any closer to a deal, Mr. Secretary?
Also coming up, an eagle's eye view from the world's tallest building. And a great-grandmother celebrates her 100th birthday in the skies. But after this.
خليل احطه بالصحن. هون يلا ان شاء الله.
اكفل طعامهم وعزة نفسهم. كية أم علي لعيش كريم.
Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour welcomed the Kuwaiti delegation led by Army Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Mohammed Khalid Al-Khudair to discuss prospects for forging closer military ties. The Prime Minister commended Kuwait's support, noting that the Gulf Arab state was prompt to deliver on its financial pledge under a $5 billion grant to Jordan by Gulf Arab states. He said the Gulf Cooperation Council financial contribution will help the kingdom carry out key development and service projects. Mansour also spoke about challenges facing Jordan as a result of regional instability and the repercussions of the Syria crisis on the country, which hosts about 1.4 million Syrian refugees, in addition to Palestinians and other refugees. He said that despite regional turmoil, Jordan had carried through with real comprehensive reforms. Russian President Vladimir Putin made his first public appearance since March the 5th. He met Kyrgyzstan's President Almazbek Atambayev in St. Petersburg. Putin laughed off suggestions he had been forced to lie low because of poor health, saying that life would be boring without gossip. The Russian leader smiled easily as he sat before television cameras in the Constantine Palace in Russia's second city in his first public appearance since he dropped from the public eye 11 days ago. A rare imperial eagle has set a new world record in a stunning mini-camera video that shows highest recorded bird flight from the tallest building in the world, Dubai Burj Khalifa. The camera strapped on the bird, called Darshan, shows the entire flight from an eagle's eye view, capturing stunning scenery of Dubai. After his aerial tour of the city, Darshan began to free fall all the way to the ground, landing on his trainer's arm. The event was organized to raise awareness for endangered species. Also in the skies, a great-grandmother celebrated her 100th birthday in style by free-falling out of a plane. South African centenarian Georgina Harwood completed the tandem skydive near Cape Town to mark the big day. She landed safely before being handed a well-earned glass of fizzy stuff to celebrate her landmark birthday. Not content with that death-defying stunt, now Harwood plans to be plunged in a cage into shark-infested waters. She described the skydive as an exhilarating experience, despite having already completed 2 jumps, the first at the ripe age of 92. This time, she was joined by 15 members of her family. After describing the jump as wonderful, she said, give me some more adjectives and I'll add them on.
You can look wherever you like, Georgina.
There we go. Wave with the camera.
We begin with the European Champions League, a difficult task for Atletico Madrid at the Vicente Calderon Stadium tomorrow when they face Bayer Leverkusen. Leverkusen have a 1-0 advantage in their Champions League last 16 tie. Simeone's side have won all 3 matches in Madrid in this year's competition with a combined score of 10-0 on aggregate. Atletico will try to clip Leverkusen wings and stop them progressing to the quarter-finals for the first time since 2002. Rafael Nadal beat Igor Sasling 6-4, 6-2 to advance to the 3rd round of the Indian Wells. The 3rd seed player had no trouble against his Dutch opponent, ranked 134th in the world. Nadal won in 72 minutes and will next play Donald Young of the United States. Also in Indian Wells, world number 2 Roger Federer launched his bid for a record 5th title with a clinical 6-4, 6-2 victory over Argentina's Diego Schwartzman, which lasted a little over an hour. Federer treated the stadium court crowd to his familiar array of blistering forehands, clean hit backhands, power serving and delicate drop shots as he broke Schwartzman once in the opening set and twice in the second. The 33-year-old will next face Italy's Andrea Seppi.
Game for Federer.
Finally, chilly tonight in most areas with northwesterly light winds. Temperatures tomorrow will be around their seasonal average, with fair conditions forecast for much of the hilly areas and warm in the Jordan Valley. The Dead Sea should expect a high of 26 degrees. Winds tomorrow will be northeasterly, changing to northwesterly brisk. And further south, Aqaba should enjoy warm weather with northerly moderate winds and slightly choppy seas. Now, a look at temperatures forecast for tonight and tomorrow. Now, our top stories once again. The Prime Minister says Jordan cannot alone bear the burden of hosting a large number of Syrian refugees amid a decline in funding. In a final bid to woo right-wing voters on the eve of Israel's election, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vows that no Palestinian state will emerge on his watch. And Syrian President Bashar al-Assad dismisses remarks by the US Secretary of State that he should be included in negotiations on a political transition. And that's the end of tonight's news. My name is Raad Liptouch. Thank you so much for your time. Have a good night.